This scene in the locker room from episode 1 is one of my favorite examples of how important micro expressions and physical acting is in developing character, and also how it impacts the scene. In the book, Ilia leaves the shower first and Shane is left in the shower, wondering if Ilia was seriously suggesting that they do anything together. Shane quite literally wants to escape through the bathroom wall and settle himself down before going back into the locker room so that he can talk reasonably with Rosanov and end this thing. He is determined to end it, and then when Shane enters the locker room, Ilia is the one in there already half-dressed, sitting on the bench. In the book, Shane is the one in the towel, but here we see how flipping that dynamic establishes early power dynamics between them in a very different way. In the show, we see Ilia around the corner in the towel with his hand behind his head on his hair, something we see him do in episode 4 when he's fixing his hair before opening the front door to let Shane in. We also see him playing with his hair a few times throughout the series when he is nervous. So this seemingly is nothing of note in the scene, but it becomes an important callback later on that we can refer to. It helps us to assign feelings to the characters when we start to pick up on their visual cues. Ilia looks at Shane and then turns into his locker, and Shane has been sitting on the bench frozen, presumably thinking the same thoughts that he has in the book. Once Ilia enters the locker room, he snaps back into himself and starts to put on his shoes, and he is so flustered that he drops the second one, which I think is a beautiful way to showcase his own nerves at that moment. When Shane drops his shoe, Ilia smiles at him with a lot of amusement on his face, but Shane does not see that smile, only we do. This is already the 6th time that Ilia has smiled at Shane or found Shane funny in the episode. And Ilia is the one to ask Shane, "Is that what you want?" in response to Shane telling him, "We can just forget about that." This is a line that will be mirrored in the finale for us to call back on too, which I think is brilliant. Shane glances at him quickly when he asks that and says, "Yeah, for sure," but he doesn't actually look at Ilia. And again, Ilia laughs at him and says, "Wow, you are a really bad liar." This moment between them, Shane doesn't see Ilia smile, he can only hear him laugh. And they have this great near-miss moment where Shane looks at Ilia and Ilia looks into his locker, so he misses Shane's glance. And then when Shane looks away, that's when Ilia looks back at Shane, so Shane doesn't see Ilia's glance. That's a visual cue that they're not on the same page yet. Shane is taking forever to tie his shoes, which is also important because the two of them both linger whenever they are getting dressed in the show or getting ready to leave one another. And this is the second time we establish that. Shane was already dressed and could have left the locker room, but he didn't. He wanted to tell Ilia they couldn't do this, but then he doesn't tell him that. Ilia approaches Shane here with the towel around his waist, and this shot is meant to make him look bigger than Shane and also make him look like a very sexual person with the attention on his abs and his V-line and his waist. And Shane, like the viewer, cannot ignore that in this shot. If they were to follow the book, then that would eliminate the opportunity to establish Ilia as a very sexual person and character this early on ahead of their first hookup. And for Ilia's character, as we will come to know and as written in the book, he has always used that as a means to an end. He impresses people with his body and his performance and doesn't think that him as a person and his personality is enough to do that. He would navigate the world thinking that a large portion of his value and worth is in that sexual presentation. Shane does pause trying to tie his shoes to watch Ilia approach him then, and Ilia looks into Shane's locker to see what's inside of it before he addresses Shane directly again, and he simply asks, "What is your room number?" because Ilia is cutting through the subtext, something we will see him continue to do throughout the series but is being established here early on. Ilia can read people very well, and he already can read Shane. And this scene is so effective in showing the viewer that Ilia is emotionally intuitive and hypervigilant. He knows Shane is lying to him and to himself, and he is the one steering the ship because Ilia knows that Shane is too disciplined and uptight to ever give in to what he wants without the opportunity being presented to him. Shane finally sits up and takes a long breath, then makes eye contact with Ilia for the first time in this scene. And you can see through Hudson's acting that his brain is working so hard here. And Shane in the book thinks to himself that he gives Ilia his room number far too quickly. In the show, you can see how tense his shoulders are with his hands on his knees, and that's when Ilia puts his hand on his towel around his waistline to make sure that Shane absolutely cannot avoid looking at him when he is this close to him. So this is yet another time when Ilia is putting his body on display to make his intentions explicitly clear to Shane. The way he lays the invitation out there is also brilliant for establishing their power dynamic because he poses it as a question and sets up a hypothetical for Shane. Well, if I come to 1410 tonight at 9 o'clock, he's not saying he will go. He's not asking if he should go. He's more so proposing it so that Shane is in control of how this plays out. And Ilia's actions are going to be entirely dependent upon how Shane responds to him here. This is now the second time in this scene where Ilia gives Shane the power back. The first is when he asks him, "Is that what you want?" after Shane says we can just forget about what happened in the shower. And then here he's asking if he wants Ilia to come to his room. So while a lot of the early shots between them put Ilia in that more domineering position of the two, or dominant, it's actually Shane who's very much in control of the entire situation. And Ilia is simply initiating things and waiting to see if Shane engages with him. Shane's line delivery here of "I might open" reinforces to us and to Ilia that he is still hesitant because of the word choice "might." And neither of them actually commits to anything here, which would feel safer to Shane. His voice also stays up an octave at the end of the sentence, so he's not punctuating it with certainty. So Ilia once again takes Shane's lead and responds with "I might knock." And this entire exchange is brilliant writing and foreshadowing into how many of their early conversations are going to go. We can then leave this very quick scene knowing that Ilia is already asking for consent and permission when it comes to Shane, and he's letting Shane dictate the pacing because Shane clearly wants this, but Ilia knows he's not going to say that, and he's not going to act on it unless Ilia takes control of the situation. So he does. This scene in the book is truly only a few sentences, but the show version of it is so foundational for how much of their relationship dynamics are going to play out, and it clues us into this so subtly that we don't even realize how significant the moment actually is until much later on when we can refer back to it with all the new context we gain. To me, that's proof of a really strong screenplay, but also the acting in this scene really adds so much because even in this moment here, we can see Hudson have Shane glance very quickly over at Ilia without trying to give himself away, and that's so indicative of the character and a great contrast to the behavior we see him exhibit by the end of episode 6.